I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode number 191, Emotional Stress Fractures. Hello, my lady. If you have a spouse that is struggling with a pornography problem, then you are in the right place. My name is Jolene Wynn, and I am a life coach, a member of the LDS faith, and the wife of a former porn addict. And in this podcast, I am going to teach you how to change the way that you are affected by your husband's choices. We can't change him, but what we can do is change the way that you respond when he makes the decisions that he does. I'm going to teach you how to manage your brain, how to process all of the emotions that seem so overwhelming to you so that you can finally live a life where you aren't living in fear of triggers and relapses. And by learning how to manage your mind and process your emotions, you are no longer going to be running on an emotional roller coaster, but you are going to start feeling so much more in control of your life no matter what your husband is doing. And I'm going to teach you all of that on this podcast. I can't wait to get started with you, and I'm so glad that you are here. I promise you, you're in the right place. Good morning, my ladies. Happy Monday. I hope you guys had a great New Year's last week. We talked about resolutions because it was a brand new year. It's 2024, which I'm still getting used to writing and typing out. And I hope you guys had a good New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And we have had a beautiful week here, but today I'm going to talk to you about emotional stress fractures. And the reason that this is coming up today is because I stress fractured my foot. And I wish I had a good story. Everybody keeps asking me, how did you do it? And really, it's very boring. And I'll get to that in a minute, but that is what has inspired today's episode. But I did want to tell you guys, if you are setting New Year's resolutions, if you are thinking about this year and you want help setting goals and resolutions and really changing yourself from the inside out so that you can stop setting the same goals every year and actually accomplish them, then I would love to have you come join me inside my coaching program. If you join this month, we are doing a brand new masterclass that is all about goals. I'm going to be teaching how you can approach goals in a brand new way that will actually help you to achieve them in a way that is easy, rather than feel like you're trying to do it through willpower and inevitably failing. So whatever that goal is that you set year after year, it's to lose that same 20 pounds or to finally finish that degree or whatever it is, then I want to invite you to come join me because I'm going to teach you how to address this in a brand new way. Again, not in a way that's just through willpower or strategy, but in a way where we're actually going to change from the inside out in order to become the person who can achieve those things. And that's how you actually achieve it. If this all sounds very conceptual and very odd to you, then go listen to last week's episode because last week I talked a lot about this and how it's actually done. So we are going to be doing that masterclass, I believe on January, what is it? It's the third week of January. What date is that? Let me look up my calendar. January 22nd. So it's in 2 weeks. January 22nd through the 25th, that is that masterclass. And so if you join my program, you will automatically get to come to that and you will be able to also get access to the recordings. So if you're listening to this later and you say, I missed it, you can still join my program and you'll have access to not only this masterclass, but all the masterclasses that I have taught. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that my business mastermind starts in 2 days. So for all of you coaches and entrepreneurs who want help getting your mind right so that your business feels easy and aligned and authentic and you can stop struggling and start actually seeing the results that are accurately reflecting how much effort you're putting in, then I want to invite you to come join me. You can go to my website, jolenewynn.com, go to the business coaching tab, and you can sign up today right away. I have 2 spots left and we start in 2 days. So all of the details are in a bonus podcast that I dropped last week called Business Coaching. You can go listen to that. It has all the details of what this entails. And again, you can just go sign up right now and I would love to see you there. Let's get your business going. Okay? All right. Today, ladies, I want to talk about emotional stress fractures. It's not really a thing. I made it up, but physical stress fractures are a thing. And I have one in my foot. Okay. And as I was talking about this and thinking about it, I thought this is exactly what happens emotionally. And I wanted to talk to you guys about it. So a stress fracture, for those of you who do not know, they're tiny little cracks in a bone, and they are caused by repetitive force often from overuse, okay, such as repeatedly jumping up and down or running long distances. Now, again, this is why there's no good story. I have no good story for why I am in so much physical pain. Okay. There is no dramatic event. I didn't fall. I wasn't doing a front flip. I didn't have an accident of any kind. All that happened is that a year ago when we moved, the day that we moved, the very first box I start carrying down the stairs to load into the truck to move to our new house, I tripped. I missed the last step of our downstairs. It was totally just missed it, and I completely twisted my ankle and I sprained it. Okay, and so for several weeks I wore a brace and it was all swollen and I iced it and I did all the things. And ever since I stopped wearing that brace, the bottom of my foot, like on the outside of my right foot, would hurt occasionally, especially when I was running or walking on an incline. So I was like, no problem, I just won't walk on an incline. And usually I just do that for warm up, and I was like, I'll just walk on flat until it feels better. It's probably just, from overcompensating for my ankle, right? And so over the last year, I have tried to adjust, and sometimes my foot is totally fine, and sometimes it hurts a little bit, and I just power through and I just run through it until I could not anymore. On Christmas Day, I ran a couple miles on the treadmill at the gym, and my foot did not feel better. In fact, it started to feel really worse. And so the next day I was like, okay, I'm going to take Rob has a little lacrosse ball. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to roll my foot over the lacrosse ball. Maybe it's just a really tight muscle, like that's cramped and I need to loosen it up. And so I started doing that, and the pain, ladies, was pretty intense. And I was like, no, I just need to power through. And I pretty much felt a pop, okay, in my foot. And that's when I stopped. And so there is no good story. I didn't do anything. All I did was run. All I did was work out, which goes to show you why you shouldn't work out, right? No, that's not the moral of the story, but sometimes it feels that way. So that's what a stress fracture is. A stress fracture is from overuse. It's a tiny crack in the bone that most of the time you can't even see on an x-ray. Okay, like if you look up a stress fracture, most people will say, yeah, I have a stress fracture. You could not see it on an x-ray. That's how tiny it is. I went and I got an x-ray. They could not see it. They said, I don't see a crack in the bone, but you have a stress fracture. Okay, so these are tiny cracks that are so small you can't even see, and they're caused not by some giant blunt impact, not by some accident or single force, but by repetitive force from overuse, such as repeatedly jumping up and down or running, doing something over and over and over again, and just powering through until you can't anymore, until you literally break yourself doing it. Does this make sense? So these stress fractures are micro fractures that develop gradually over time. And as I was sitting here thinking about this, I thought this is exactly what happens to us emotionally. When your husband is struggling with a pornography problem, the way that we handle it, is good in the moment, right? I've talked about this so many times. Our brain is fantastic and it's wired to keep us alive. And so that's what it's going to do. But when we don't override that, when we don't take charge of our brain, what happens is that automatic response of survival, that's what we tend to do over and over and over. So we resist our emotions, we distract from them, we just shove it down and power through, and that works until it doesn't. That is the emotional pressure that we keep putting on ourselves over and over and over. That is the repetitive force that then eventually, because we keep following that pattern, creates a micro fracture. And that's when we break. And that's when our pain all of a sudden comes to the surface and we suddenly can't do what we have been doing. Does this make sense? And those micro fractures are so small you can't even see them. Okay, these little fissures that happen emotionally inside of us. It's like these tiny little cracks are coming internally, emotionally, and we don't even realize that that's what's happening. We just keep powering through. We just keep repeating the same pattern over and over and over, and that pattern eventually creates a stress fracture. Okay. Now, this is why it's so fascinating. I have so many women that'll come to me and say, I don't understand why I'm having a problem all of a sudden. I've been dealing with this for 20 years. And I say, that's exactly why you're having a problem all of a sudden, because you've been dealing with this for 20 years. And it doesn't matter how much the time is, right? It's like, he relapsed 6 months ago. Why is this coming up for me today? It doesn't matter. The reason is because you've been handling it in a certain way. And now all of the pressure of how you've been handling it has created a stress fracture, an emotional fracture in yourself. Does this make sense? This image for me totally resonated. And if it's not resonating with you, you can just leave this. But it made so much sense to me that this is exactly how we respond. We respond in such a way that we create an internal pressure that eventually causes us to break ourselves. It's not even something that happened outside of us. It's how we've responded to it over and over and over again. So a stress fracture is an overuse injury. Okay, it occurs when the muscles become fatigued and are unable to absorb all the added shock. Again, this is exactly what we do emotionally. When we are not handling our emotions, when we're not processing our emotions, when we are not in charge of our brain, when we're not watching our thoughts, when we aren't processing through all of these things, what we do is we become fatigued. The way that we handle things no longer works because we use so much energy simply trying to absorb all of the added shock, and eventually that collapses. I give you guys that image of the beach ball all the time. When we aren't processing our emotions, we're trying to shove a beach ball underwater, and all of the pressure and our muscles eventually cause them to fatigue. When you're trying to force something below the surface, our muscles fatigue, they get tired, and eventually they collapse. And that's exactly what an emotional stress fracture is, right? That ball flies up and pops up into the air and creates a huge dramatic wave. And that's exactly what happens with an emotional stress fracture. That's exactly what it is. The way that you've been processing, the way that you have been handling everything works up until a certain point, but your body is absorbing all of the extra shock until it can't anymore, right? I always talk about this, how we have all of these buckets of emotion inside of us and how we only have so much emotional capacity during the day. And so we push things down and we power through until our emotional capacity gets to a point where we can't push it down and power through anymore, and then we explode. Then we have a breakdown and we let off just enough steam to keep going. That's the same as an emotional stress fracture. So this is why you might feel like, I've been dealing with this fine. Why is it coming up now? This is why. It's because stress fractures are an overuse injury. You have been repeatedly hurting yourself unknowingly, and the muscles around yourself your emotional muscles have become fatigued, and they can no longer keep it all below the surface. You have literally caused yourself to break. And there doesn't have to be a dramatic event. That's the thing. That's the same thing with a stress fracture. There is no dramatic event. I don't have a good story. I don't have oh my gosh, I was hit by this car, or I was saving this child from getting hit by a car, or I rescued, there is no good story, okay? The story is, I was running and my foot hurt and I thought I could power through and I couldn't. And that's it. That's the whole story, okay? I broke myself. That's the story. Literally by running on the treadmill. That's it. There was nothing that happened. I didn't even fall off the treadmill. I didn't trip on the treadmill. Nothing. There does not have to be a mechanism of injury. The mechanism of injury is overuse. The way that you have been handling this isn't working. It's actually causing yourself to fracture internally. Does that make sense? Because your emotional muscles have become so fatigued, and it creates an overload of stress that causes a tiny crack. And that tiny crack, ladies, let me tell you, can cause a lot of pain. Okay? Now, if you have an emotional stress fracture, which most of us do, because we're not handling our emotions the way that we should, right? Or in a healthy way, then what do you do about it? Right? The only way to actually get rid of or heal a stress fracture is rest. It's to stop doing what you have been doing that created the stress fracture. That's it. And that's how you treat it. You stop doing, you have to change the behavior, you have to change the pattern so that you stop hitting it in the same place. Otherwise, it's just going to get bigger and bigger, and that tiny microfracture is just going to expand until eventually what's going to happen is you're going to create an actual fracture, something that's not just tiny, something that's not, unseen on an x-ray, but something that can be seen on an x-ray, that needs a cast, that needs surgery, that needs bigger intervention. But you can prevent it from getting that place by applying a different strategy, by changing the emotional behavior. Now, what does that look like practically? Here's what that looks like. I want you guys to take a look at what areas in your life are you struggling with the most. When you look at your relationship, when you look at your husband's pornography problem, where is it that you feel this the most? Where is it impacting you the most? Where do you feel the most pain? That's what I want you to take a look at, okay? Is that in your sexual life? Is that in the way that you see your own body? Is that in your distrust of him and his behavior? Is it coming out in arguments, in how you're talking to one another? I want you to think about where that behavior is hurting you the most. That's your emotional stress fracture. I want you to take a look at that. What that is an indication that you are not properly and in a healthy way processing all of the emotion and thoughts around that thing, around the distrust, around whatever the conversation is, around your body physically, your thoughts about yourself, your thoughts about sex and your relationship with him, all of those types of things. That is what I want you to look at. And that is how you can start to gauge. I want you to ask this question: how is it that I'm responding? How is it that I typically respond when I look at myself in the mirror, when he initiates sex, when he's on his phone, when he walks in the door and he asks me how my day was? Whatever that quote unquote trigger would be, or whatever the situation is, that is the stress fracture. And we need to look at how you're responding right now, and that's what we need to change. Now, again, we need to be really clear here, because it's not just about changing your behavior. That never works, okay? Because we have to do both parts. We can't just change the action, because if the thought and the feeling are the same, it's going to come back. Does this make sense? We can't just think our way out of how we feel. We can't just willpower our way to change. What we have to do is we have to take a look at it. Not if we want it to change in a permanent way, right? That might work temporarily, but it's not going to work forever. What we need to do is look at, okay, what thoughts am I thinking? What feelings am I avoiding? How am I feeling? What am I thinking? And that's what we need to take a look at. And when we take a look at that, that is when we can start to change the behavior. That is when we can stop responding emotionally the way that we've been responding. And when we can change that, that is applying rest. That's when we stop giving ourselves that emotional stress fracture. That's when the pain subsides. Does this make sense? I hope this image was helpful for you guys. It was so powerful for me to see. The beauty of, I think that I just really want to drive in here is that micro stress fractures aren't even visible. The things that are hardest for you in your life are often invisible to everyone else. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're not there. I went to the doctor on Friday. I got an x-ray. There was nothing on the x-ray and I felt really dumb. Okay, I did. And he said, it's okay. Lots of times you can't see stress fractures on an x-ray, but it doesn't mean that they're not there. And I had to sit with this for a minute because I felt really stupid. I was like, okay, am I just making this up? Am I just being a big fat baby? I was judging myself I was like, maybe I just need to suck this up. And he's like, no, it's okay. He's like, this is a stress fracture. You just can't see it. And that is what happens emotionally. We have these emotional stress fractures, this pain, this tiny crack in our emotional soul. And it's invisible to everybody else, but that doesn't mean that it's invalid or that it's not there. Okay? And I really want you guys to hear that, because there's nothing wrong with you for responding the way that you have been. Again, your brain has been responding exactly how it's designed to respond. Your brain is designed to keep you alive, and congratulations, that's what it's been doing. The problem is that now we're at a point where we can recognize, okay, the way that I've been responding has kept me alive, but being alive isn't all I want to be. Because right now I'm alive and I'm miserable. And I don't really want to be alive and miserable. I kind of want to be less miserable if that's possible. And it totally is. But first we have to acknowledge that we're hurt. First we have to acknowledge, okay, here is where I am. This is where my pain is. This is what's causing it. And what's causing it, ladies, is not a mechanism of injury. It's not, oh, it's because my husband comes home and he's always in a bad mood. Or, oh, it's because my husband is on his phone and I can't trust him because of all the things that he's done. Everything that is creating your emotional stress fracture is internal. It's how you're thinking and how you're feeling about what's happening around you. And again, this could have happened 20 years ago. He could be sober for the last 5 years and you could say, I don't understand why this is still a problem. The reason it's still a problem is because of how you're responding. It's because the pattern that your brain created in order to survive is now no longer working for you because you want to do something other than survive. There doesn't have to be a mechanism of injury. It's repetitive use. It's overuse. It's responding in the same way over and over and over and over. And now it's created a problem. And so when you recognize that, that is when we can start to shift it. All right? If you want help with this, I'm always available. You can come join my program today and I will help you learn how to do this. But let's start changing how you respond so that you stop creating these emotional stress fractures, which creates even more pain for yourself than in the first place. All right? I love you ladies so much. I will talk to you guys next week on a brand new episode. So take care. All right, ladies, it's time to rise up and take charge of your healing, and I have the best way for you to do it. I have created a lifetime access coaching program that I have designed specifically for you and exactly what you're going through right now. This is where I help you develop a personal mastery of all the tools that you're learning here on the podcast in order for you to create a permanent change. Go to my website, jolenewind.com. You will find all the information there and you can sign up today and we will start going forward. I can't wait to see you there.